Welcome everyone to today's webcast, How to Choose a Plan that Aligns Investment Decisions with Strategy in 2015. My name is Ben Chamberlain. I'm the Chief Product and Marketing Officer here at UMT360, and again I'd like to welcome everyone to today's event. For those of you not familiar with UMT360, UMT360 provides enterprise portfolio management solutions designed to transform the way companies manage their enterprise investments, also providing business and IT leaders with the insights and transparency needed to better align execution with strategy. Before we jump in, a quick housekeeping announcement. We will be pausing at the end of today's session for a Q&A, so please post any questions you may have during the session in the Q&A wizard, Q&A manager in GoToMeeting. So let's look at the agenda for today. First, we're going to look at why companies struggle ultimately to align strategy and execution. And then we're going to spend the majority of the session reviewing and contrasting two approaches to help bridge the gap between strategy and execution. We'll look at a project-based investment management approach and a business capability-based investment management approach. And as I said, we'll compare and contrast the strengths and weaknesses of both approaches and look at choosing the right path for your organization, and end with Q&A. So today, most business and IT leaders are concerned about their company's ability to effectively execute against their strategies. They also acknowledge the fact that failure to deliver strategic initiatives will make their organizations less competitive over the next 3 years. As shown in the slide, David Norton, the co-founder of the Balanced Scorecard, says that 85% to 90% of companies fail to deliver on their strategies today. The Economic Intelligence Unit, in their recent report, Why Good Strategies Fail, found that 61% of companies struggle to bridge the gap between strategy formulation and its day-to-day implementation or execution, and also noted that 44% of strategic initiatives have been unsuccessful on average. So what's the impact of failing to bridge the gap between strategy and execution? Put simply, companies are wasting scarce resources and budgets through suboptimal project selection and poor project delivery or execution. When combined, these factors result in a perfect storm that both hinders business transformation and performance. Over the last 15 years or so, companies have adopted project and portfolio management techniques with the promise that they would help better align investment decisions with strategy and also improve project delivery and execution. The truth is, the traditional PPM techniques are failing to deliver the anticipated results, leading to many executives questioning the effectiveness of their PPM discipline and PPM teams. Although industry analysts don't necessarily agree on the exact stats, they all agree there's a problem. So some of the well-understood stats here on the left-hand side, the Standish Group saying 18% of projects fail to get implemented or delivered, 43% of projects come in challenged or over budget. Gartner saying that 1 out of 3 completed projects experiences significant cost overruns. And the good old PMI also noting that 33% of projects fail to meet their intended business goals or intent. From our own research, and we've been working in project and portfolio management longer than I care to remember, what we see today is organizations focused on more execution-orientated PPM capabilities are at risk of losing around 46% of the planned business value from their portfolios. Another way to look at that is 46% of the investment in your project and program portfolios is at risk. Now, it's easy to throw numbers out there, but let's take a look at how that value is eroded. There are 3 key factors and something we like to call the trifecta of business value erosion. The first, unreliable planning and innovation. The second, poor project success rates. And the third, poor budget utilization. So taking a look at the first, today, all too many organizations lack an objective framework for selecting the project and program portfolios that best align with their strategy. All too often relying on the shiniest PowerPoint or the guy that shouts the loudest to get projects funded. Even when organizations have adopted an objective annual planning or portfolio optimization framework, the impact of unreliable cost estimates is a problem. Early on in the annual planning process, estimates are inaccurate and can cause problems. If cost estimates are too high, during the optimization and selection process, you're simply drawing the line too early in your project portfolio, leaving too many good projects behind. Without the discipline to reevaluate those decisions throughout the year, that value will remain lost. So next, poor project success rates. We talked about 18% of projects failing to be implemented or delivered. If you fail to implement a project, you can't claim the value from it. Also, cost overruns have a significant impact on portfolio value. At the portfolio level, cost and budget is finite. So if projects cost more, something has to give. You're going to cut projects that were planned to be delivered for the year. You're going to de-scope projects, both of which activities will result in a loss of business value. One of the surprises to me when we conducted this research was the impact of poor budget utilization. All too often, organizations not spending all the budget that's allocated them throughout the year. A variety of reasons for this. Could be resource shortfalls, meaning projects failed to get kicked off during the implementation year. Could be unplanned carryovers, with projects slipping from one implementation year to the next, value not being achieved in that given implementation year, and worse still, budget being left behind from that year and eroding budget from the next year. But the overarching problem with poor budget utilization was the fact that all too often poor forecasting capabilities or techniques led to money being held hostage at the project level and not allowing PMO or bodies of people responsible for governing project and program portfolios to effectively reallocate those funds throughout the year and maximize the value from the overall portfolio. In today's session, we're really going to focus on two techniques that help to improve strategic planning and ultimately derive demand that better aligns with the strategy of your organization. Before we jump into that, let's move ahead with our first poll for today. So the question we're going to ask you is, how would you rate your company's ability to effectively align project and program selection with the business strategy today? And the options you have here is my initiatives, my projects and programs are strongly aligned with strategy. Initiatives are moderately aligned with strategy, or today there's no alignment between initiatives and the business strategy. So initiatives are strongly aligned with strategy, initiatives are moderately aligned with strategy, or no alignment between initiatives and strategy. So we'll close the polls. And here we can see the results, with 16% of everyone polled here saying the initiatives are strongly aligned with business strategy, a majority, 76%, the moderate aligned with strategy, and no alignment between strategy, 8%. So we'll drill a little deeper into this as we move through the session today. So returning to the slides. Before we take a look at the two approaches, let's take a quick look at how investment decision-making techniques have evolved over the years. First, from the 1950s to the early 2000s was the project management era. In this area, the focus was on execution-oriented activities like schedule management and resource management, and the real focus was on delivering projects on time, within budget, and to scope. This focus gave rise to introduction of techniques like critical path analysis, PERT analysis, earned value management. However, in this era, less attention was given to objective frameworks to improve investment decisions. Next came the project portfolio management era in the early 2000s. This era recognized the need for a portfolio focus, with as much emphasis placed on selecting the right projects versus just executing the wrong projects effectively. Companies adopted portfolio management techniques to improve decision-making and align investments with strategy. Today, we're in the business capability-driven era, which recognizes the need to more effectively bridge the gap between strategy and execution. This takes more of a strategic focus and identifies the gaps in key organization capabilities needed to execute business strategy and generates demand to close the gap. So for the rest of today's session, we'll review and compare two techniques to better align execution with strategy. The first will be the project-based investment approach, which was created in the project and portfolio management era and is still used by many companies today. The second is the new business capability investment approach. So first, the project-based investment approach. This investment approach includes best practices from the analytical hierarchy process, or AHP, to help companies effectively select project portfolios that best align with the business strategy. In effect, we're maximizing the investment alignment of the resulting project portfolios with our business strategy. there are 4 key steps that comprise the project-based investment approach, and we'll review each of these. First, define business strategy. Second, prioritize business strategy. Third, consolidate and prioritize requests, project requests. And fourth, optimize and select the ultimate portfolio. So let's jump into each of these. The first, define business strategy. The intention of this step is to work with the executive team to define an actionable, measurable, and unique set of business drivers. This is done by facilitating a business driver definition workshop. Ahead of that workshop, many PMO teams and business analysts will look to develop a draft set of business drivers, usually reviewing annual reports and marketing material and mission statements and high-level goals of that organization to build a set of actionable, measurable, and unique business drivers. As mentioned, drivers should be actionable, meaning there should be one or more initiatives that can be applied to them. Measurable, meaning we're going to set KPIs to measure the success of that driver. And unique, meaning there should not be too much overlap, anywhere between 6 to 10 business drivers. Fewer than 6 means there is going to be overlap. They're going to be more like the strategic goals of the organization, and more than 10 also comprises an issue. So the next is that business drivers should have a 3 to 5 year focus. They're going to cover core dimensions of your business, whether it's growth, cost reduction, efficiency, quality, risk, customer employee satisfaction goals. And as mentioned, we're going to define metrics and KPIs to measure those drivers. And these KPIs are used to build impact statements that you see on the left-hand side here. And these impact statements provide an objective way of assessing the contribution of initiatives or projects against each one of the business drivers. And we'll look at how these are used in a second. So having worked with the executives to define a set of actionable and measurable business drivers for the next 3 to 5 year period, the next step is to work to convene a business driver prioritization workshop to objectively prioritize the business strategy. There's different techniques we can use to prioritize business strategy. The technique showed here is the pairwise comparison assessment, which is basically an objective technique to compare the business importance of each business driver pairing. If you look at this chart on the left-hand side here, we're simply going to navigate from row to column. So if I take the improve employee satisfaction driver on the row here, I'm going to compare and contrast it with the drivers on the columns here, and simply ask, improve employee satisfaction, is it more or less important than reduce expense base? And the options you're going to have are extremely more important all the way down to extremely less important. This results in an objective priority score for the business drivers. The recommendation is actually to convene driver prioritization workshops of each of the executives individually at first to understand their own perspective, so understand the perspective of the CIO versus the CFO versus the COO, and so on. Having understood their perspective and actually got overview of potential divergence of opinion between the group, the idea is to bring everyone together into an executive consensus building workshop where we're going to prioritize the drivers in a collaborative form. Again, relying on the pairwise comparison technique, but zeroing in the group onto areas where you know there is a divergence of opinion. The benefit of this approach is really the open discussion that occurs in these workshops around the relative importance of one business driver to the other. The other main benefit is we end up with an objective priority score for each of the business drivers for the next 3 to 5 year period, which can be revisited on an annual or even quarterly basis. This is a relative priority score, which allows us to do a couple of things. One, it instantly allows us to understand the relative importance of each business driver. So if I look here, increased share into existing markets has 28% of the weighting, whereas, which is the highest ranked driver, whereas improve employee satisfaction only has 4% of the weighting. So we can say here that improve employee satisfaction is approximately 7 times less important when compared to the top business driver, increased share in existing markets. Because we have this relative scale, so a normalized score now, we also have a scale that I can look at reversing investment alignment back into strategy. So if I had $100 to invest in my strategy and I wanted to ensure total alignment, I would stick $28 on the top business driver and $4 on the bottom business driver. So without that objective prioritization technique and relative score, you're unable to assess those two things. So having worked with executives to understand what the business strategy is and help them prioritize it, we can now go ahead and look to capture and consolidate the competing project requests that we will look to evaluate. So establishing a demand management process to consolidate all demand from across the business and standardize business case templates to evaluate the competing demand is key. Business case templates should include high-level descriptions of each of the investments, cost-benefit analysis, ability to derive different assessment scores to help evaluate the request, high-level schedule information, resource information, and as you see, the list goes on. One of the key assessments within the business case is to actually understand the contribution the project will have on the business strategy. And on the right-hand side of the screen here, you see the strategic impact form, which leverages those impact statements that were created as part of the business driver definition workshop and does an objective assessment of understanding the contribution the project will have on each business driver, from extreme impact all the way down to no impact, again, leveraging those KPIs defined to make that an objective assessment. The output of this analysis is to understand the strategic value of each score, so derive an absolute score that quantifies the business value or strategic value of each of the projects, and this can be used to prioritize the projects. Another score that is important and is used next to optimize the portfolio is strategic yield. So taking the strategic value of a project and dividing it by the costs captured in the cost-benefit analysis gives a yield score for each of the projects, or another way to look at that, a bang for the buck for each of the investments. This yield score is used to help optimize the portfolio based on limited budget constraints. So being able to use optimization techniques to model different budget constraints and allow the tool to select the project portfolio that best aligns with the strategy under those constraints is key. Utilizing the project-based investment approach, organizations look at techniques like efficient frontier model that you see on the right-hand side here. The efficient frontier has cost on the x-axis and strategic value on the y-axis. The efficient frontier basically represents the best buy from the portfolio under different cost thresholds. The efficient frontier itself represents the point of diminishing return. At what point am I spending more and more money to get significantly less value? It's very easy then to plot, optimize the portfolio and understand where the selected project portfolio falls in relation to the efficient frontier. For example, scenario 1 here was run under a budget constraint of $14 billion and actually results in 85% of the overall portfolio value. Whereas scenario 3 has actually fallen beneath the efficient frontier, meaning constraints like resource constraints, cost constraints, and maybe projects that have been forced in, pet projects from different senior management members, are actually meaning that that portfolio is falling beneath the efficient frontier, so it's a suboptimal portfolio. So it's a great way of understanding what the maximum value you can gain from a portfolio is under different cost constraints. Because we invested time up front to understand the business driver priority and prioritize the business drivers, again, we have that relative scale now where we can understand the investment alignment of the selected project portfolio against the business strategy. So the chart on the right here, again, is an output of the portfolio analysis. Once you have a selected portfolio, you can reverse the costs back against the relative importance of the business strategy. So understand where you're potentially over-investing in a business strategy based on its importance, or under-investing, and drill down deeper. So that was a quick roundup of the project-based investment approach. And again, the techniques we used here was to first define strategy, then prioritize strategy, then capture project requests from across the organization, do an impact assessment of projects against the business strategy to prioritize the projects, and then look at techniques to optimize the project portfolio under different cost constraints to select the portfolio before moving into planning and executing that portfolio. And as said earlier, we're only going to focus on the upfront identification of potential projects and programs in this session, and not going to drill into planning and ultimately executing the project portfolio. So what are some of the strengths and weaknesses of this approach? To me, one of the main strengths is the ability to engage the executive team, help the executive team to formulate their strategy through business drivers, and then work with them to articulate the priority of those business strategy for the upcoming planning period. So you've engaged the team to help them to define what's important to them and the priorities. The strategic value score is also very good at being used to objectively evaluate different types of projects. The yield score, or the bang for the buck score, ensures you can maximize investment alignment against strategy under varying cost constraints. The approach is also very good at evaluating discretionary investments only, but not as good at looking at optimizing operational spend or investments against strategy. So what is some of the bad or the weaknesses of this approach? To me, one of the biggest concerns about this approach is the fact that strategy is defined and prioritized in a silo. You engage the executive teams to define and prioritize strategy, and then you simply go out and capture project requests across the organization, and then do an impact assessment of how those projects align to the strategy. But I don't think we ever really stop to ask ourselves, what are we doing here? Are we just simply selecting the best of a bad bunch of projects? Do we have an innovation problem at our core? So how well aligned is that demand ultimately to the business strategy, as it was simply derived in the silo and then mapped against the business strategy? Another problem with this approach is that often the strategy is not detailed enough to be fully actionable across the business. Maybe need to break it down into more granular strategic objectives so it can be more clearly understood and communicated across the different business units or functions in the organization. Because budget is often also allocated by business unit, this approach often tends to favor larger, more profitable business units or lines of business at the sacrifice of the smaller business units. The approach is very strong and used a lot in annual planning, but not used as much to support our multi-year planning. As mentioned before, again, strong approach at evaluating discretionary investments, not so good at analyzing operational investments. So we'll pause for the next poll. So which best describes how your company selects project portfolios during annual planning? And the options here is we have no standardized process for consolidating or evaluating project requests. We have a standardized process for consolidating project requests. We have the standardized process for consolidating and prioritizing requests, so projects selected based on just prioritizing from different dimensions, or project portfolios are optimized and aligned with business strategy. So in essence, you're following a similar approach just outlined for the project-based investment approach. So again, we don't have any requests today in terms of consolidating and evaluating projects. We do consolidate project requests in the central repository. We consolidate project requests, and then we use prioritization schema to help select the projects, or we're following the project-based investment approach and optimizing and aligning the project requests against business strategy. So pause for another 10 seconds or so. Okay, let's close the polls and show the results. So, no standardized process for consolidating and evaluating projects, 18% of you. Standardized process for consolidating project requests, 35%, so 35% of us just capturing projects in a standard inventory. We do have 38% having a standard process for consolidating projects and prioritizing requests, and only 9% optimizing project portfolios against business strategy. That's interesting. If I remember the results to the first poll, I think there were, if memory serves, around 76% said that initiatives were moderately aligned with strategy. But yet, when we look at the results here, that's probably based on the 38% of organizations consolidating and prioritizing project requests. But yet, when we think about how to actually align project requests to business strategy, requiring that project-based investment approach, only 9% of us said here that we were doing that. Okay, let's move on. So let's switch gears now and take a look at the business capability investment approach. As shown here, there are 5 key steps in the business capability investment management model. The first is to build a business capability map or model. The second, again, define and prioritize business strategy. Third, map our strategy to our capabilities. Fourth, analyze the performance of capabilities and allocate budget. And the fifth here, generate programs and roadmaps. So let's step through each of these. So the first, building a business capability map or model. So the first key step is to standardize and define your business capabilities across the organization, or build your business capability map. The example you see on the left-hand side here is a capability map for that's coming from the insurance industry. So I often get asked, what are business capabilities? I think there's a lot of confusion in terms of what business capabilities are versus business processes, business services, business competencies, business functions, and the list goes on. Put simply, business capabilities represent what your company does at its core. They are containers of people, process, and technology that are addressable or used for a specific purpose. Business capabilities are at the center of your company's business architecture and provide a dynamic blueprint of your enterprise that is used to effectively align strategy and demand, both operational and discretionary demand. So when you're building out your business capability model or map, there's a few things to consider. The capability maps are hierarchical, should be no deeper than 3 to 4 levels deep. As already mentioned, capabilities should describe what, not how, something is done in your company. As mentioned before, business capabilities and business processes are often confused. So a business capability describes what a company does, whereas a business process describes how that capability is fulfilled. Capabilities must be clearly defined at all levels and have specific outcomes. Lower-level capabilities inherit the intent of their parent, and business capabilities should ultimately be defined independent of the IT support or IT assets that are automating them. So business capabilities, to me, really are the missing link that helps you effectively bridge the gap between strategy and execution. By integrating business capabilities into your ubiquitous enterprise portfolio model, it helps you break down or break through enterprise silos and connect product, program, IT assets, and project portfolios to build that dynamic blueprint of your company. You're also able to identify capabilities that are critical to executing on each of the business strategies that have been defined. IT leaders are using business capabilities to more effectively align IT assets and initiatives with business priorities, improve communication with the business, and ultimately demonstrate the value of IT. Because we're also able to understand what applications, IT services, and other business assets are required to support a business capability. Business capabilities can also be used to aggregate operational and strategic spend. So you get a view across all spend, not just the discretionary spend in your organization. So when you're building out your business capability portfolio or inventory, another few things to keep in mind. You're going to define governance workflow to control that business capability through its life, through introducing a new business capability, ultimately to retiring a business capability or making change to an existing business capability. As mentioned before, being able to clearly articulate and describe a business capability is key. So capturing the required descriptive data for that business capability is certainly important. One of the areas we'll focus on in a little bit is the ability to analyze business capabilities. So generating metrics as to the business importance of a capability, its operational performance, both external and internal performance, and risk and other metrics is key. As mentioned, by being able to aggregate information through our enterprise portfolio model, we can also look at understanding the true cost of ownership of each of the business capabilities. And we also want to be in a position to keep an auditable record of decisions made on each capability and build transformation roadmaps to effectively communicate that across the organization. So it's key in building your business capability map or portfolio. So step 2, we're going to look at defining and prioritizing business strategy. In this step, which differs a little bit from the project investment approach, project-based investment approach, we're actually going to break down strategy into more actionable strategic objectives. So we still step through that exercise of defining our business strategy. Now, the business drivers with 3 to 5 year focus. Again, it should be actual, measurable, unique. We want to not just also record metrics for each business driver. We also want to establish key targets for each of those strategies and build impact assessments this time to assess the impact of the underlying strategic objectives. So we're going to drill down one level deeper now and now describe strategic objectives for the organization that can be more concisely communicated and are more across different business units and are ultimately more actionable. They have a 12 to 18-month focus. And again, we're going to look at recording metrics and targets for each of the objectives. So if we look on the right-hand side here, we may drill down into a business strategy such as expand into new markets and segments and understand what are the key strategic objectives that we want to prioritize for the next 12 to 18 months. Could be drive sales in emerging markets, move to cloud for subscription licensing, accelerate revenue by reducing time to market. And we specify what the KPI or metric is we're going to measure, as well as establishing a target to track against. So a key step in breaking down the business strategy into more actionable strategic objectives, which can be more effectively communicated across the organization. Now, from a prioritization perspective, we're still going to engage the executive team to understand what the relative priorities are for the business strategy. Again, leveraging techniques like pairwise comparison, as we described before, to prioritize the business strategy. As mentioned, part of the definition of the business strategy is to build impact statements to assess the impact that each one of the strategic objectives will have on each one of the business on the business strategy. So in the left-hand chart here, you see the impact of each of the underlying objectives against its parent, the business strategy. The benefit of this approach now is that we can objectively prioritize and communicate those priorities of the strategic objectives across the organization. So this results in a prioritized set of strategic objectives, as you can see on the right-hand side. So again, we work with the executive team now to define the 3 to 5 year strategy, break the 3 to 5 year strategy down into more actionable strategic objectives of a 12 to 18-month focus, and ultimately prioritize those objectives and communicated the priority of those strategic objectives. The next key step, and one that's a key differentiator between the two investment approaches, is to ultimately map the strategic objectives to the business capabilities. So in this impact matrix here, we can very quickly see which capabilities are going to be responsible for executing against each of the strategic objectives. So when we see things like strategic objective 4.1, which doesn't have any supporting capabilities, this may end up in a decision to generate a new capability to more effectively execute on this strategic objective. When I look at capability 10 here, which has no support on any of the strategic objectives, this may result in this capability being decommissioned, or may simply be a fact that this capability is more foundational and is not aligning to any of the strategic objectives. So being able to understand which capabilities are important to deliver on the strategy is key. The next step in the process is to look at the supporting capabilities to each one of the strategic objectives and analyze them, understand their current performance, and then allocate budget. And we do this by taking a look at the importance of each capability versus its performance. I said up front in terms of deriving a business importance score and performance score for the capabilities are key. So if you look at this bubble chart here, we're simply plotting the capabilities relative to their importance and performance, and size of the bubble here represents the cost. So if our capabilities are falling in the sort of top left-hand area here, they're likely to get an investment weighting of invest heavily, because simply these are very important capabilities which have low performance. So we want to invest in these capabilities ultimately to improve performance, move them closer in to the sort of center swim lane, diagonal swim lane in this view. If our capabilities are falling within that center swim lane, they have a sort of good ratio of business importance to performance. Likely we're going to maintain our investment in these capabilities. Conversely, when we start to see capabilities that falling in the bottom right sort of diagonal swim lane here, these are high-performing capabilities, low business importance. The one here with reduced investment, it has a high cost. We may look at opportunities to rationalize costs from capabilities based on their importance versus their performance. So being able to analyze the capabilities that are core to delivering on the strategic objectives of the organization that have been defined and prioritized is key. So we're basically understanding the performance gap in these key capabilities. And then we're going to use this analysis to associate in the investment weighting and ultimately generate programs that will affect change to these capabilities and help us more effectively deliver on the strategy itself. So having done this analysis, the output of this analysis is to one, allocate funds and then generate programs themselves. So as we see here, we're allocating funds to the capability itself for the next 3-year period. So the business capability 5 here, you can see it has a high business importance, relatively low operational performance. It had the investment weighting of invest heavily, and we're able to now allocate program-level discretionary funds multi-year. Because we are able to understand the importance of each of the business capabilities, again, we can now look at the budget allocation expressed proportionally to those capabilities. So again, even though business capability number 5 here is our highest ranked business capability, we can see we're potentially under-investing on that capability relative to some of the lower prioritized capabilities like capability 3 here, where we're potentially over-investing. So the ability to assess performance, the ability to allocate funds, and next, generate programs. And the key differentiator here is, as I said before, we're generating programs based on the known changes we need to make to the core capabilities that are going to help us execute on the strategic objectives that have been defined. So being able to consolidate our programs, build out business cases again for our program investments, description, cost-benefit analysis, resource requirements, key assessment metrics is all key. But the difference here is we already know that our demand is strongly aligned with our business strategy as it was generated based on the changes that we need to make to effectively execute on those strategic imperatives. So next, we don't really have the question of, is this the right demand? We know this is the right demand. The only real open question is, when can we do this? So this is where we can look at now looking at building out program roadmaps across a multi-year period to understand when we should action each of the program investments based on available budget constraints and resource constraints. And this results in multi-year roadmaps that better utilize the available budget and resources in the organization. So, next, a quick roundup of the capability investment approach. So we again recap the steps that we took here. We first invested in building a business capability inventory. Next, we looked at defining and prioritizing strategy, and then identifying the associated business capabilities that are key to impacting or key to delivering on that strategy. Then analyzing the performance of the capabilities and identifying opportunities, improvement opportunities, and capturing those through programs and generating multi-year roadmaps, which then ultimately will be planned and executed upon. So what is the good of a capability-based investment approach? Well, to me, at its core, as I've said a few times now, it basically results in demand that's been generated directly from changes needed to effectively execute on the strategy. So there's a very strong alignment between the resulting demand and the strategy itself. Because we have the ability now to decompose strategy to a more granular level, it helps improve communication of that strategy across all business units, which is key. We talked about budget being allocated here at the capability level, which again is a fairer allocation as budgets being allocated based on key changes needed to each business capability versus just provided to the organizations based on size or profitability. As discussed, it's a good technique for looking at multi-year planning versus just annual planning. And because we're able to aggregate both operational and discretionary spend, although we just looked at the kind of discretionary side of things today, we actually can look at assessing the business value of all spend in the organization, both operational and discretionary. One of the key challenges, I think, around the business capability investment approach is there's kind of an all-in approach. It requires the definition of your business capability inventory or map. And it also needs you to integrate the business capabilities with other enterprise portfolios to build out that dynamic blueprint. So there is work to be done to establish this model and then maintain that model going forward so you can continuously ensure that execution is aligned with strategy. So if we pause for one more poll, I think this is the last poll. And the question we're asking here is, how is your company using business capabilities to improve strategic planning today? And the answers we have here are, we have not defined a business capability model. Our business capability model is defined but not used in our planning process. Our business capability model is defined and used to identify redundant requests. Our business capability model is defined and used to generate programs. And project portfolios optimize alignment with business strategy. I think that last question shouldn't be there. So we're going through those again. We have not defined a business capability model in our organization. Our business capability model is defined but not used in our planning process. Our business capability model is defined and used to identify redundant requests. This is one area we didn't touch on, but often business capability models are just used to evaluate traditional demand that's generated across the organization. So you see you have multiple projects impacting the same capability. Maybe there's redundancy in those requests. And our business capability model is defined and used to generate programs which ultimately make the improvement to the business strategy. So pause for another 5 seconds. Okay, so shut that and share the results. So a majority, let's see the results. Yeah, a majority of us have not defined our business capability model, are not aware that our business capability model is in place. 53%, 20% as aware that the business capability is defined but is not used in the planning process, which is often the case we find in organizations. 7% is using the business capability model to assess project demand and identify redundant requests. Or 11% is truly using the business capability model to generate programs aligned with business strategy. Okay. So if we put these two approaches side by side, we can see the relative strengths of both. Now, both are viable and good processes. But if we look at them side by side and we take a look at business strategy, definition, prioritization, we said with the project-based investment approach, when you just stay with those high-level 6 to 10 business drivers across with a 3 to 5 year focus, it's often difficult to communicate them in an actionable form across all different lines of business or business units in the organization. Whereas in the capability-driven investment approach, decomposing or cascading that strategy down to the appropriate level and focusing on the key objectives for a more granular period, 12 to 18 months, aids in improving communication and driving stronger alignment across the organization. Budget allocation. We talked about often in the project-based investment approach, budget being allocated more on a line of business or business unit level, which favors larger, more profitable functions, whereas in the business capability-driven approach, budget is allocated still within a business unit, but at the capability level and based on the improvements you need to make to each of the capabilities to deliver on the strategy that's been articulated. From a demand management and innovation process, the project-based investment approach is very good at evaluating and aligning investments opportunities with strategy. But as I said before, often strategy and the demand are generated in silos, and we're really just then evaluating that demand against the strategy, and we're never quite sure whether the generated demand was the best quality demand in the first place. Whereas in stark contrast, the capability-driven investment approach, the demand is generated based on the changes needed to the capabilities that in turn support the execution of the business strategy. So again, before you even look at any kind of optimization analysis or selecting when to do these programs, you have the best demand articulated in the first place. From a portfolio selection and alignment point of view, the project-based investment approach, again, very, very strong at evaluating demand and ensuring ultimately the projects that are selected under varying cost and resource constraints are optimal in terms of their alignment with the business strategy. Whereas there's no real, in the capability-driven approach, we don't really focus on which investments to do. It's more about when we're going to do them because we know we have the best quality demand in the first place. Project-based investment approach, normally more suited to an annual planning approach, which is good. Capability-driven investment approach is used in multiple levels. Support that multi-year roadmap and then revisit it on annual and quarterly and a quarterly basis as needed. From a budget point of view, the project-based investment approach really strong at assessing discretionary investments because you can map a project and a program directly to the strategic imperative or strategy in the business. But the capability investment approach is good at evaluating the business value of all spend, both operational and discretionary. Very difficult to map an IT asset like an application directly to a strategy in the organization, but using capabilities of that bridge, I can map an IT asset which has both discretionary and operational spend associated it to a capability and in turn understand which strategies that capability is supporting. So again, two very effective approaches of better aligning project and program selection with strategy, but important to understand the relative strengths and weaknesses of both. So it's important to be able to choose the right path for you to better align execution and strategy. Although I may have a personal bias in terms of the relative merits of the capability-based investment approach. It doesn't mean that it's right for everyone today. For many of you that answered the poll in terms of we're just consolidating project requests or just consolidating project requests and prioritizing project requests, maybe the next step is to move to the full project-based investment approach, where then doing a better job of evaluating projects against the strategy that's been defined and prioritized in the organization, and utilizing techniques to more effectively align investment with strategy for the upcoming planning period. For those of you that are already utilizing a project-based investment approach, maybe it's time to recognize some of the shortcomings of that approach, and over time look to move to the capability investment approach to improve ultimately the strategic planning and how demand aligns with the strategy in your organization. So choosing the right path for you is key. So this ends the presentation. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. In terms of next steps, I would encourage you to one, take a look at how you're currently doing strategic planning in the organization. If you have a business capability map already defined, think about how you can make better use of that if you're not currently using that in terms of your strategic planning today, or integrating that with other enterprise portfolios to get visibility across all investment in the organization. So I'm going to pause now and take a look at the Q&A manager, and in the remaining few minutes, just answer any questions that may have been posted.